Once upon a time, there was a man who fell into a pit and couldn't get himself out. A sensitive person came along and said, "I feel for you down there." A practical person came along and said, "I knew you were going to fall in sooner or later." A self-righteous person said, "Only bad people fall into a pit." A mathematician calculated how far he fell. A reporter wanted an exclusive story on his pit. And a self-pitying person said, "You haven't seen anything until you've seen my pit." An optimist said things could be worse, and a pessimist said things will get worse. But Jesus, on seeing the man, took him by the hand and lifted him out of the pit. The image of a good shepherd comes from those who tend to the flock, literally shepherds, but it means so much more here. Shepherds are the ones who are in charge of the people, called to lead them in God's ways. Being a shepherd for God's people is a demanding task. Jesus speaks of those who run at the first sign of trouble. We have to be committed to be shepherds. In the 8 verses of today's gospel, Jesus says 3 times that the Good Shepherd lays down his life. Jesus gives us the perfect example of this in his crucifixion. Jesus' life is not taken from him. Remember what Jesus said when he is on trial. Pilate acts as one in power, but Jesus tells him he would not have any power if it had not been handed over to him. Jesus' life is not taken from him. He freely gives it up for us. This is how dedicated Jesus is as our shepherd. Are we like the hired hand who runs at the first sign of the wolf, or are we committed to the tasks before us? Do we see what we do as a job or as a vocation? Today is World Day of Prayers for Vocations. A while before my deacon formation, my pastor asked me to be a reader at morning mass, and I was nervous. And I still get nervous sometimes. There are some words that are pretty hard to pronounce in the Gospels. A bit later, he asked if I would ring the bells during Mass, and I declined, confessing that I did not know when to ring the bells, but he suggested he would tap his foot and signal me. So I did it. Still later, he asked me to be a Eucharistic minister, and I really liked that. Time went by. I was busy at work, the family, all the other things in life, but that pastor kept calling on me for various things. Then a few years later, he asked me to consider being a deacon, and he told others about my discerning, even before I knew I was discerning. People were telling me they were praying for me. Back then, deacon formation was a weekend a month. That included Friday and Saturday nights, another Saturday each month, and summer internships. And it was like 5 years, and it was a year of prereq class before it, and I was way too busy. That weekend thing, it was described as being like at the old Boy Scout camp. Cabins, outside bathrooms, bugs. For me, it was no can do, but people kept praying for me. Just as I made up my mind that it wasn't going to work for me, they moved the location to the Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth. It was like a 5-star hotel, closer to home, great food. So I committed to try it. But it was going to be like 5 years. As time went on, I came up with all kinds of excuses. But every obstacle that I could think of was removed. And here I am. I've heard stories from many people in their vocations, priests, other deacons, husbands, wives, people from all walks of life with similar stories about people and themselves praying for others. We are all called to serve God by living our lives as Jesus teaches us and sharing our faith with others, and by being good stewards of the gifts, our time, talent, and treasures that God has given us. And it's not always easy. We can find a good shepherd in every good mother and father. We can find a good shepherd in the humble and God-fearing youth, in the devoted brother or sister, where there is a caring doctor, a nurse, a dedicated teacher, first responder, cook, cleaner, or gardener. There is a good shepherd. Christ is the good shepherd, and he's here to help us, but he does not force us. He simply invites us to take his hand. Do we have the courage to admit that sometimes we are trapped in a pit? Are we able to reach up and have him help us out? Are we willing to let Christ be our good shepherd? In today's gospel, Jesus isn't suggesting that we're a bunch of totally dependent sheep who don't know where they're going or don't know how to get there. He isn't demeaning or disrespecting us. He is calling us to care for those, in the great scheme of things, who are placed in our charge. He is calling us to have attitudes like those that are found in the Good Shepherd of our souls. Anyone who is in charge of others is called by God to care for those placed in their charge. They are the parents, grandparents, they are teachers, doctors, nurses, lawyers, priests, ministers, next-door neighbors, and mentors. Good shepherds pass values to those placed in their charge. They realize that God has placed others in their charge and wants us to value them as much as he does. It's all about love, isn't it? Jesus, in his love, is known as the Good Shepherd. He loves us enough to call us to love as he does. This isn't just another job. Jesus doesn't call us to functionality. Jesus believes and hopes in us enough to place others in our care so that we can shepherd them as he does. That's a high compliment and a calling that he gives us. My prayer for us today is that we allow God to pull us out of our pits and we help him shepherd his flock.